So this session today, it's another panel session. It's going to be chaired by Dr. Josh Case, who I'll bring up on the screen in a second, and then who will also introduce the other panelists. For those that don't know Josh, he is on the screen now. How are you going, buddy?
I'm very well, Peter. Thanks very much for having me.
No worries. To give Josh a bit of an intro, and then I'll hand over to him to introduce everyone else. He's a junior doctor and software developer passionate about innovation, global health, entrepreneurship, and teaching doctors to code. He recently left full-time medicine and pursued a career on the boundary of all things technical and clinical. So he's creating lots of technology solutions to help doctors on a day-to-day, practical things, fast-paced, getting things out. There is a podcast episode we did recently, which Dead Set, though, was one of my favorites. I'm not saying it because you're next to me, but I really enjoyed the conversation. So do check that one out. I think there's a lot we can explore. And this is why I'm excited to have you chair this session around a career in health tech with the panelists we've got in a second. He's also got a book called Code Blue, an introduction to programming for doctors and medical students, which you should also check out. So I'm going to bring everyone else on the stage and we can get going. So there we are, everyone. Cool. And I'm going to drop off and let you take it away, Josh.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Peter. Thank you very much for that warm introduction. And thank you for the shameless plug. I'm really, really excited for today, where we've got a great session lined up around forging a career in digital health and health technology. And I've got such an awesome panel today that I can't wait to introduce, some of whom I've had the pleasure of meeting before and some that I haven't. So if I get any of this wrong, please feel free to interrupt me and correct me if I don't get any of this right. But quickly, before I introduce our panel, I'd like to make my own acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'm joining the Zoom call from Melbourne, where the Wurundjeri people hail from. So with that said, I could sort of spend all day introducing this awesome panel, but I've restricted myself to a sentence or two for everyone, just in the interest of time, because there's so much fantastic sort of content that I want to get through. The first person I'd like to introduce is Dr. Robert Perlman, and he's the founder and CEO of MedApps, and he's a clinician who taught himself to code to build the first version of MedApps a number of years ago, and it's now used by more than 22,000 clinicians across Australia, the UK, the NZ, and Canada, one of which is me. It was a very formative tool for me in making the transition from medical school to working as a doctor. So welcome, Robert.
Thanks, Josh. Good to be talking to you again.
Yeah, very happy to have you here, Rob. We've also got Jason Borrie, and Jason Borrie is the founder of HPM Executive, which is a specialist executive search and selection firm focused exclusively on emerging technology ventures in the life sciences. So we've got some awesome industry expertise to sort of contextualize all of this discussion today. So welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
We've also got the wonderfully esteemed Amandeep Hansra, who's a leader in digital health in Australia. She founded Evermed Consulting and provides digital health consulting services across the health sector and is involved in a range of startups within the ecosystem. I know Amandeep from her roles to do with Creative Careers in Medicine, which is basically the largest digital platform for doctors seeking, I guess, a different career path in Australia. And welcome, Amandeep.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. When I first spoke to Amandeep very briefly a few weeks ago, when she sent me a message inviting me to join the group, and it was when I joined Creative Careers in Medicine group, I sort of instantly felt that I'd found my people. So she's done a great job with that awesome community there. We also, last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Ben Hurst, and he's a doctor who turned writer and then into a startup founder. His career's sort of zigzagged all over the place from, I think he did his internship in Geelong, or his clinical internship in Geelong, and then he worked at Warrnambool for a while. He then worked in the Port Phillip prison as a psychiatrist. He was a novelist in New York, and now he's the CEO of HotDoc, a Melbourne-based health tech company. So welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
So I thought we might start the discussion today by sort of leaving this fairly open with a fairly broad question. And that question is, what are the sort of things you need to have a flourishing career in health tech? Rob, do you think your background in clinical medicine gave you a leg up in the sort of things you've been able to do with MedApps? And do you think that's essential for someone trying to go down a road like you have?
Josh, well, I think everyone needs to bear in mind that everything I say is going to come from the benefit from the post hoc rationalizations that everyone's course starts to have. So
Yeah.
for me, absolutely, it was essential that I'd gone through internship and residency and had experience of the hospital system. But as I look around, I've come across a lot of people who've gone through different paths. My feeling is that it's definitely really beneficial to have some clinical experience, and I don't think that doctors by any means should have a monopoly on this. There's a lot of wonderful people with nursing backgrounds and allied health backgrounds that are out there contributing to the field. And also in the consulting space as well, people who've spent a lot of time working in healthcare and understand how it functions, because I do believe that you need to be inside a system to be able to have a go at changing it.
You're absolutely right. I think certainly with the scale of the public health systems that we operate in Australia, having someone on the inside is a really big advantage. I guess, going down that line, I might throw this one to Jason.
Sure.
We know that companies having clinical insight is important, but I might get you to speak to, I guess, a bit of the appetite for, what sort of skills are emerging technology companies in the life sciences looking for? I assume they want clinical input, but what are some of the other skills that these kind of fledgling digital health companies are looking for in their people that they're looking to recruit?
Well, the reality is it depends on the nature of the role that they're actually looking to appoint. So specific skills. But I think, looking at the industry, digital health, what it might want in terms of skills and knowledge out of its people in the future, I don't think it's that much different in many ways from many other industries. Though, as we all know, moving forward, softer skills, people skills are far more important. So, whilst I really do recognise, and I am often tasked with identifying people who have a range of industry or commercial specific skills, having a clinical background is really important and adds credibility and in spades. But if they aren't able to engage, if they aren't able to communicate effectively, if they aren't credible, if they don't have the capacity to influence outcomes, and these are personal competencies that you can develop over time. If they're not willing to listen and change tack, then there's absolutely in a dynamic environment such as startup type businesses, there are people who haven't grasped the nettle on those competencies are really going to struggle.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. I think those of us who've worked clinically would all have encountered people in hospital environments who, as you say, aren't that willing to think flexibly, or perhaps aren't that way to look at a new way of doing things. So it's very interesting to see to hear from you that that's valued in the private sector as well. I think now might be a good time to bring in Amandeep with your, as a digital health expert and also sort of very connected to the, grassroots sort of movement for people in healthcare looking for, as you say, creative careers in and around medicine. I might get you to talk a little bit about the spectrum of opportunities that's out there for someone who's maybe they're clinical, maybe they're not, but what that spectrum of involvement could look like in digital health. There's people who still work full-time clinically and, maybe they sit on a startup board, and then there's people who quit their job on the other end and don't do any clinical stuff at all. Can you speak a little bit about what that spectrum looks like and maybe give a few examples of different ways that people could bring digital health into their career path?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Josh. Our community is almost 11,000 people, which is really exciting. To think that many people are sort of thinking quite creatively about their career tells us a lot about medicine. And it might be that they're getting burnt out and they're fed up with, their current sort of day-to-day, or it might be that they actually are excited about what the future could look like. And I think it's a mixture of both. But I definitely agree with sort of the comments from the other panelists around it's not about having a specific skill. Like Josh, you're a coder, and a lot of people come to me saying, do I need to learn how to code to get into digital health? And I can't code. I'm actually not as, tech, I shouldn't admit this, not as tech literate as everyone assumes that I am. But I think the things that clinicians or some of the people that come and approach me, do possess or have or should have is that problem-solving attitude. So there are people who come in who are really, as Jason mentioned, creative thinkers, who are adaptable, because as we know, technology is changing so frequently. So there's no point learning about a specific technology, because chances are in a couple of years that tech's going to be new. And it's really about the underlying principles. What are you trying to achieve with that technology? How are you trying to improve the health system? Because often we look at tech and we go, here's a great piece of tech, let's find a problem we can solve with it. And, it's really the wrong way around. And people should really be going, what are the problems in our healthcare system? And is there technology around that might solve this problem? And then how do I bring it into the health system? So it's really about that adaptability, flexibility, understanding the principles of good patient care and what we're trying to achieve. And in terms of how people actually get involved, so as you said, there's a whole spectrum. So you can start off just dabbling in it and saying, look, I just want to provide some clinical advice. I'm a full-time pediatrician, and I want to provide advice to a startup in the ped space in just giving them some clinical input, right through to you can quit your day job and start, do a startup like, I think Rob did at the beginning. But often people I find like the mixture. So, I still practice clinically and I don't think I could stop that. But I think having a mixture is some of the great things about digital health, because it actually helps you in both sides of your jobs. So you can be a really great clinician in understanding some of the pain points and how to solve them, and then you can be great at your digital health sort of consulting role, because you day-to-day deal with frontline problems that other clinicians experience. So I think there's a whole range, but my advice is to get started is just dip your toes in the water. Don't give up your job just yet, because it might not pay what you want it to pay, and it might not be as glamorous as you think it is. There's a lot of hard work involved. So just start with little things, and as you get more exposure to the industry, you might start to figure out where you fit in all of it.
Really, really well said. I echo a lot of what you've sort of put out there. Ben, I might latch onto something that Amandeep said there. She said, she was alluding to that there's, I guess, lots of reasons why someone who's clinical might wind up in a digital health role, or start founding their own company. One of the examples she gave was, perhaps they're a bit burnt out. I recently made a career move to work more in digital health, and I often get people assuming that I was sort of completely fed up or, burnt out with the medical system. Maybe there was an element of that, but that wasn't completely true. Can you speak to a little bit about what led to, you transforming from clinical and then, all the way through to founding HotDoc and then coming to have the, big success you've come to today? What did that kind of journey look like for you? Were you fed up with it, with clinical medicine, or do you want something different, or what were your motives kind of making that transition?
Yeah, sure. I was a little bit fed up with clinical medicine. Not because I didn't think clinical medicine it's an incredibly enriching vocation. And the moments that you can experience with a patient in the four walls of the room, it's like that there's a real dignity and honor in being a doctor. What I found, and it took me 10 years to realize this, is I just wasn't that good at it. My brain is not about remembering facts and having these ability to sort of ask for these symptoms and then think about what's the right investigation and then what's the thought process beyond that, which is it's not required for every single medical discipline, but it's a really important way of thinking. And my brain, it always struggled. So it took me 10 years before I realized I'm a bit more of a creative person, and I kind of just like to focus on things that maybe there isn't existing knowledge, but you can almost start from square one. So I went through the whole rigmarole of trying my hand at emergency, then psychiatry, then writing a book, and HotDoc just fell in my lap during a drunken conversation in New York bar. And it was the idea that took me there more than sort of a forged career. It was much more serendipity. And so I think my advice would be, if you're a disenchanted doctor or you're not loving it, digital health can be really exciting. If you are a really happy, fulfilled doctor, digital health can also be really exciting. Our clinical advisor, Jag, he works full time as a GP, and he loves the work he does with HotDoc, as well as what he does clinically. I myself, I haven't done what Amandeep's done. I've burnt the boats and sort of just become a good business person. And that's worked for me. So I think there are lots of ways to tackle this. And it just sort of I guess it starts with knowing yourself, and then the second thing is just being really, really excited about an idea that you want to see through all the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd add a little bit to that if I could jump in there.
Please, yeah, please do.
Because, you know, in my line, I see people from all sorts of backgrounds, their professions, you know, accountants, lawyers, engineers, and they're no longer doing accounting, legal, or engineering work. They've pursued different avenues, and it's not at all surprising. I think the point that I'd make from that is that if there's people out there asking themselves this very same question, they realize they're not alone, and it's not alone within medicine. They're not alone within society.
Absolutely.
That's really well said. I think historically, medicine has had one of the highest rates of, you know, you study medicine and then you work in medicine, whereas, you know, things like engineering have always had high rates of sort of divergence. I think we're now actually starting to see that trend normalize in many ways, where the rates of people who study medicine and now work in, I guess, more broader career opportunities, those sort of rates are normalizing. And I guess while I've got you on the floor, Jason, you know, let's say you're a mid-career clinician or quite a senior, fairly advanced through the clinical training pathway, and you want to start adding some things onto your CV or things on your belt to make you more employable in the, you know, in the technology sector, in the life sciences, maybe in the startup scene. Are there things that make you a lot more recruitable in the business world as a clinician? You know, is it an MBA? Is it speaking at conferences? Is it having business experience? What are the types of things that a mid-career doctor could add onto their belt to make them recruitable in another world, in another sort of space?
I think that's a really interesting point. I think in medicine, there's career development is often, you can diploma your way into career development, and additional qualifications can lead to career options. And that isn't necessarily the case out in the commercial world. You've got a couple of options here. You know, you're looking at starting up your own or with some other people, or leaving to join larger organizations in a non-clinical role. And in terms of what you need to do, they may be quite different. I mean, MBAs are great in and of themselves. Personally, I don't believe they mean that much. They indicate intent, but until you've actually married that diploma with some real world, where the rubber hits the road, that's where you'll actually demonstrate what that has done for you personally and what you can then do for your prospective employer.
That's really well put. I think it echoes a lot of my thoughts kind of along that. Kind of there's this almost never-ending treadmill of qualifications, isn't there? And at some point, something has got to give, doesn't it? I'll just quickly, just while we've got a second, I'll mention a couple of comments that are coming through from Jackie Rebeck, who's mentioned that I refer friends from medicine to Creative Careers in Medicine, the group, at least once a month. And Aidan Cousins, who I think is the community manager here, said, I actually got my first software job through Creative Careers in Medicine, which is awesome. So I don't think the message is very clear. If you're interested in that sort of space, Creative Careers in Medicine is the place to be. And Rhiannon Nevin-Dolan has said, I think one of the biggest challenges moving away from directly clinical role is losing part of your identity and understanding that whatever steps you take are valid and worthwhile. That's a really, really insightful comment, Rhiannon. And it actually echoes, even going from full-time to part-time, echoes something that I've kind of gone through is, you know, a doctor is such a huge part of who I am, and stepping away from that a little bit felt a little bit, it rocked the boat a little bit. So really, really big comment there. Did anyone in our group here, I guess, struggle with, you know, was it mom or dad or grandma or grandpa who, you know, had their granddaughter or grandchild was a doctor and, you know, kind of struggle with that transition, or maybe their family and friends' expectation of what their career should look like?
I definitely did. More through medical school than not, where I was sort of a bit unhappy and was sort of thinking about alternatives. And yeah, like my parents were both doctors, and it was, they're very understanding, empathetic people, but it was very hard for them to understand that that someone would find it difficult to find true fulfillment in healthcare. And I guess my advice would be to just keep having those conversations. You feel pressured, just like, you know, maybe you're not going to resolve that the first time, but, you know, family, they'll get on the same page eventually. So don't just storm out of the room the first time you have that conversation.
I think that's great advice. Thanks very much for sharing, Ben. I might take it down a little bit of a different track now and maybe pick on Rob. And I want to ask a question a bit about, sort of risk taking as a clinician in digital health, because, as a profession, clinicians tend to be risk averse. We're trained to see, risk and danger around every corner. And then, you look at this transition to an industry where, starting your own company, it's among the most quote unquote risky things you can do, and that it has a very high rate of failure. And you have to start doing things like, asking people to pay you directly. That's not something that doctors do very often. And so there's, I guess, a risk involved with that transition. Rob, did you find yourself having to, adjust how comfortable you were with risk to do this? Or did you feel yourself always at the end of the spectrum where you were willing to take risks? I guess the reason I'm asking is, for people who feel worried about these types of things, do you think that precludes them from getting involved in the type of things that you do?
Well, I think I've probably always been fairly comfortable with risk, but also probably was a little bit naive going in some areas, and some elements of the sort of risk hangover sort of only appeared after I'd committed to the path. But I guess in the back of my mind, I'd always, this was meant to be a detour for a while so that I could scratch an itch, and hopefully it would succeed or fail in a couple of years, and then I would be able to be comfortable. There would be a surgical career to go back towards if the business didn't work in a short period of time. And then it was more the adjustment of, well, it's now 6 years and we're still going. What's going to happen to my clinical career? That was the interesting sort of psychological change that I had to come to terms with. But I think also one of the things that really helped with that was the community and meeting a lot of other people, from a clinical background who are around in not only in say health tech, but also in the hospitals that we were dealing with, who were full of enthusiasm and recognizing that we were solving a problem and supportive, that made it very helpful when things were going a bit slowly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned that, sort of connecting with people who've gone down a similar line. Rob and I met each other a couple of months ago when I just sort of inquired about MedApps and wanted to sort of connect with the founders and creators. And the reason I share that is, in general, I found people who work in this space to be very, very open and receptive to spontaneous Zoom calls, to share ideas, to open up their network for each other, to bounce ideas around, to get each other ahead. And I think I would reiterate to anyone who's listening to the conference or attending that, for the most part, I have found people to be very responsive to an email or a message that says, hey, I'd love to chat a bit more about this. Can you help me find my own way through this career path? So I think that would be a really good example of how someone can kind of dip their toes into this industry and learn a bit more about how they themselves can get involved. I might ask another sort of open and general question. Let's say we're at the other end of the career spectrum now, and we're talking about medical students or junior medical officers, and they're looking for some tangible way to, as you said, Amandeep, dip their toes into the digital health industry. What are some things that they can do to, is publishing a journal article something that will get them further down that career path, or what should they do to try and learn more about this industry, maybe at the sort of bite-size end of the spectrum?
Look, I would start with just connecting with the community. So coming along to events like this, I found one of the things that doctors generally don't do very well is networking. So, trying to find ways to meet other people, because generally you have a pathway to really be paid for you in terms of your next role. So you're not good at going out and meeting lots of people to try and get opportunities. So I definitely, in the health tech space, networking is everything. Go to conferences, join AIDH, join Health Tech, you know, join all of these groups, join Creative Careers in Medicine. Of course, I've got to do a bit of there. But, you know, we're a great community, and I think the health tech community has been so welcoming and open in sharing and supporting. And I'd say that would be the first step for junior doctors, for medical students. Just start coming along to events and meet people. And that's where it all starts. You don't need to publish a paper. You don't need to do a PhD. Just start there, and things will flow.
I absolutely agree with that, Amandeep. And a few things that I would add to the list are often universities will have a department or a division that's relating to sort of startup technology scene. There'll be events like, you know, startup weekends and that kind of thing, you know, that aren't necessarily strictly health focused. But that's completely okay, because you can go to those weekends, you can pick up so many skills, you can meet like-minded people, you can, you know, really open yourself up to this whole avenue of opportunity that's out there just by rocking up. I think another thing that I would add there that's been, to be frank with you, transformative for the types of things that I've tried to do is actually by writing my thoughts and sharing them online. Like, I actually didn't think that would provide as much opportunity as it has for me. So many networking opportunities and you know, business opportunities and career opportunities have come about from me just literally writing what I'm thinking about. Maybe it's the problem that I'm working on or the challenges that I'm having, and sharing that. And I think it's allowed me to really connect with the community even more so than I was previously. So I'd definitely throw those two things onto the list. All right, so we've only got a couple of minutes left. And I might open this up to everyone, again, just to sort of round things out. You know, if you were to start your digital health journey all over again, you know, today or tomorrow, what would be the set of skills that you have today that you've picked up over that journey that you would love to hit the ground running with? Like, what are the things that you felt, I guess, least prepared for coming into this sort of digital health career track?
I can start. It's a funny question because the naivety is actually useful. If you know what this leads to. For example, I had hair on my head before I started a company. It's a marathon and beyond. So I think embrace the uncertainty. And I mean, I'll re-ask the question a bit. I think what's helped me get whatever success Hot Doc has had is just curiosity and the desire to learn. And I think all clinicians are great at that. And so I think it's just like, use that as a way to sort of just like learn about sales and marketing and product market fit and hiring, et cetera, because you just like, even if you get success up until a certain point, you'll find, you know, at 10 employees, it's so different to what you need to get to 50 employees, very different to get beyond that. So it's a journey, and no specific skill, I think, or no piece of knowledge will necessarily get you all the way there.
Yeah, I certainly agree with what Ben's saying there. You know, I think clinicians are generally pretty good at working in an agile environment. See one, do one, teach one. If we're still allowed to say that, but you know, absolutely, being naive was very helpful, and being able to sort of recover from your mistakes and try not to make them again. You can usually make a mistake once, but if you make it again, the same mistake a second time, it's you haven't learned.
Very costly. Yeah. Wonderful. All right, just before we wrap up, we've spent the sort of last half hour or so grabbing all of your knowledge and sharing it with everyone else. But I might just open the floor for each of you individually. If there's any way that we can support you as a community or anything you want to give a plug, please feel free to do that now. Ben, how can we help you make progress?
Hot Doc's hiring. So if you are keen on a vocation in health technology, check our career site. And also, I am very keen to meet with budding entrepreneurs or people who are interested in joining this space. My email is bh@hotdoc.com.au, so feel free to reach out.
I will definitely take you up on that. Amandeep, how can we help you? What do you want to plug? Have you got something in the works?
I've always got something in the works, usually 100 things at the same time. Look, I just think, come and be part of our community, Creative Careers in Medicine. I think there's been some comments around that on the side, and it is a fantastic group and community. Rob's been part of that for the last few years, and Josh, obviously, you've joined recently. But it is really about that supportive environment where you don't feel anxious about telling people what you're doing or what you're thinking about doing, which I think a lot of people in medicine have struggled with because it's not traditional. So certainly join us. We've actually got a digital health Q&A on this evening as well, just asking some great digital health experts in how they navigated their career. So it's one of those days today. But yeah, we'd love to see you around the community if you're interested. So that's my plug. Thanks.
No worries. And what about you, Jason? What can we do for you as a community?
Come to me with zillions of jobs that I can fill.
If you need something filled.
What I would say though is that a big part of my job is to talk to people right across the spectrum of all stripes, and I'm more than willing to have conversations, to make introductions where they make sense, all that kind of stuff. It's a big part of what I do, and I'm happy to do that. If anyone out there is keen, they can find my info pretty easily. Absolutely.
Reach out to Jason if you need a job filled. And Rob, last but not least, what can we do to help you succeed this year, mate?
Thanks, Josh. Well, if there's anyone out there who's looking to invest in health technology, then we're currently expanding or looking for some more funding to continue to grow the team. And if there's any clinicians out there who feel like their hospital could have done a better job orientating and onboarding them to their hospital, then we'd love to find out how to get in touch with your hospital. And if you are someone else out there who's would like to have a chat about your role in health tech or trying to make the transition, then as Ben said, I'm always open for a chat as well, and my details are pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben, Amandeep, Jason, and Rob. What an awesome panel. Thank you for your experience, and thank you for sharing so openly with us today.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Josh.